Imagine the North Sea. Cold, gray, and choppy, it now separates the British Isles from continental Europe. But thousands of years ago, it wasn't a sea. It was a land, a vast, green expanse teeming with life. Today, we call it Doggerland. It's been called Britain's Atlantis, a place lost not to myth but to rising seas. Roughly 20,000 years ago, at the height of the last ice age, ice sheets locked up vast amounts of water, lowering global sea levels and exposing what was in a fertile plain stretching from the east coast of Britain across to the Netherlands and Denmark. Doggerland was born, a lush region of rivers, lakes, forests, and marshes. People lived there, hunter-gatherers who hunted mammoths, deer, and wild cattle. They fished in its rivers and crafted tools from bone and flint. This wasn't just a crossing route between islands and mainland. Doggerland was a homeland. But around 8,000 years ago, something changed. The sea began to rise. Climate warmed. Glaciers melted. The rivers widened. What was once solid ground became marshland, then swamp, then sea. The story of Doggerland isn't just geological, it's human. Bits of bone, antler, harpoons, stone tools, and even DNA fragments have been dredged from the sea floor, revealing whispers of those who lived, loved, and vanished beneath the waves. In this series, we'll explore what we know and what we still don't about Doggerland. From the people who called it home to the catastrophic events that erased it, we'll trace a lost chapter of humanity that may still shape our myths today. Who were Doggerland's mysterious inhabitants? What did they believe? How did they live and die? And why has this sunken land haunted archaeologists, historians, and storytellers alike? Let's begin our descent. Before we understand who lived in Doggerland, we must understand the land itself. Far from a desolate plain, Doggerland was a paradise, at least by Ice Age standards. Modern bathymetric scans, core sediment sampling, and geological modeling have revealed a complex, vibrant ecosystem. Imagine winding rivers cutting through grasslands, meandering past groves of birch and pine. Elk, bison, and wild horses grazed. Woolly mammoths roamed the open plains. Massive freshwater lakes dotted the landscape, connected by streams teeming with fish. This environment was ideal for Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. They followed game herds, gathered edible plants and berries, and fished the rivers. They likely lived in small, mobile groups, erecting temporary shelters of wood and hide. Their lives were intertwined with the rhythms of nature. But Doggerland was not static. It shifted constantly. As the last ice age ended, melting glaciers caused global sea levels to rise by more than 100 meters. The North Sea began to reclaim Doggerland inch by inch. People would have seen it happening within their own lifetimes. Trees drowning, marshes swallowing paths, water lapping at the doorstep of once-safe camps. This was not an overnight catastrophe. It was a creeping loss, a generational retreat. People moved inland, adapted, clung to higher ground. But the memory of a land vanishing beneath water must have left scars, not just on land, but on the minds and myths of those displaced. You won't find ruins in Doggerland. There are no stone cities or temples. Instead, the clues lie scattered, caught in fishing nets, dragged up by oil rigs, preserved in silt. It's one of the most difficult archaeological environments in the world, but also one of the most rewarding. In 1931, a fishing trawler dredged up something strange off the Dogger Bank, a lump of peat containing a barbed antler point, clearly man-made. That single discovery sparked decades of interest in the area. Since then, hundreds of artifacts have been recovered: stone tools, bone harpoons, and pieces of red deer antler carved with purpose. Human remains have also surfaced, skulls with cut marks, suggesting ritual or violence. A Neanderthal skull fragment was even found, hinting at a deeper, older past. Perhaps most intriguingly, pollen and plant material found in sediment cores suggest early humans may have practiced proto-agriculture, managing landscapes, burning areas to promote regrowth, and perhaps even experimenting with planting. This wasn't simply survival, it was innovation. DNA analysis of bones and teeth has shown genetic links to populations in Western Europe, Scandinavia, and even as far as Russia. Doggerland was a crossroads of humanity, perhaps even a melting pot where languages and traditions mix freely. But the sea is both a preserver and a destroyer. Salt water can erode bone, currents scatter remains, and most of Doggerland's story may be forever lost in the deep. Still, what we do recover tells a tantalizing story. These people were not primitive. They were adaptable, resourceful, and deeply connected to their land. Who were the people of Doggerland? They were the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers of Europe, descendants of Paleolithic nomads, the ancestors of modern Europeans. They lived in close-knit family groups, navigating a world of abundance and uncertainty. Imagine waking to sounds of cranes calling across the misty lowlands, of your father napping flint for tools, of your mother preparing smoked fish for the coming days. Children learn by doing, watching the skies, tracking animal signs, and mimicking the elders' chants beside the fire. Their world was oral, mythic, and deeply ritualistic. Burials found near ancient Doggerland zones hint at complex spiritual beliefs. Some graves are adorned with red ochre antler headdresses or arrangements of bones, possibly to guide the dead into the next world. Totem-like carvings, found preserved in riverbeds, suggest that these people had origin stories, animal spirits, and perhaps gods of land and water. They lived in domed huts made from branches, turf, and hide, often along riverbanks. Seasonal migration was common, moving with game, avoiding floods. They fished with woven traps and hunted with spears tipped in flint and bone. Some used dugout canoes, hollowed tree trunks, making Doggerland one of the earliest known maritime cultures. Despite lacking metals or writing, their lives were not simple. They managed territory, family alliances, and conflict. And as the waters crept in, they would watch their sacred places, their ancestors' burial grounds, and their beloved hunting trails swallowed by the tide. Their response to this loss, whether resistance, retreat, or spiritual reinterpretation, may have laid the emotional foundation for Europe's later flood myths. Around 8,200 years ago, something terrible happened. In what scientists now call the 8.2 kiloyear event, global temperatures plummeted for over a century. Triggered by the catastrophic drainage of massive glacial lakes in North America, Lake Agassiz and Lake Ojibwe, fresh water poured into the North Atlantic, disrupting ocean currents and causing climate chaos. For Doggerland, this was the final blow. Rising seas surged. Weather became unpredictable. Storms raged. The fertile land was rapidly consumed. Coastlines changed within a generation. Rivers shifted. Communities were swallowed. The forests turned to swamps. The swamps to salt water. This may have culminated in a mega tsunami. Around 6200 BCE, a massive undersea landslide occurred off the coast of Norway, known as the Storega Slide. The resulting tsunami, perhaps over 20 meters high, would have slammed into Doggerland's lowlands, devastating everything in its path. Archaeological evidence suggests sudden abandonment of settlements. Layers of silt and sea sand bury cultural deposits. What wasn't drowned by gradual sea rise may have been annihilated in a single day. Imagine standing by the shore as the birds fall silent. The waters recede and the earth trembles. Then a wall of water taller than the trees comes roaring in. In an instant, homes, memories, and generations vanish beneath the sea. For the survivors, it was not just an environmental disaster. It was the end of a world. And for their descendants, perhaps it became a sacred memory. Could the memory of Doggerland's destruction have survived in myth? Some scholars believe so. Across Europe, ancient peoples told stories of lost land swallowed by the sea. The Welsh spoke of Canar Gaelad, a sunken kingdom said to lie beneath Cardigan Bay. In Breton folklore, the city of Wyeth was dragged underwater due to a princess's sins. And in Scandinavia, sagas speak of fertile lands devoured by the waves. But perhaps the most famous lost world is Atlantis, first described by Plato around 360 BCE. A great and noble island civilization, destroyed in a single day and night by flood and fire. Atlantis has long been dismissed as allegory, but could it echo a memory passed down through generations? The timing is plausible. Doggerland's final drowning occurred thousands of years before Plato, but oral traditions can persist astonishingly long, especially when tied to trauma. The stories would evolve, names change, gods rise and fall, but the bones of truth might remain. And Atlantis wasn't the only story. Flood myths are near universal. from the biblical Noah's Ark to the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Deucalion flood in Greek legend. Many cultures speak of a time when the world was cleansed by water, when the old ways were lost and new peoples arose. Is it coincidence that these myths cluster around the same early Holocene period, when Doggerland and other coastal civilizations were vanishing? Perhaps not. The sea remembers, and sometimes, so do we. Doggerland was forgotten for millennia, but in the last century, it's returned bit by bit, hauled up from the deep. Commercial fishermen were the first to notice. Their trawling nets brought up not only fish, but prehistoric bones, massive tusks, flint axes, and antlers shaped by human hands. At first, they were dismissed as anomalies, but soon, archaeologists began paying attention. The breakthrough came in the 1990s with high-resolution seismic surveys by North Sea oil companies. These scans, intended to locate fossil fuel deposits, revealed submerged river valleys, hills, and lake basins. What they uncovered was staggering. A sunken landscape as complex as any on land. Then came sediment cores. By extracting long columns of seabed mud, scientists analyzed pollen, seeds, insect remains, and even ancient DNA. They could now reconstruct ancient forests, weather patterns, and animal migrations. In 2015, a project called Europe's Lost Frontiers used this data to digitally map parts of Doggerland's terrain down to individual river channels. It showed not just a land, but a place people knew intimately, where every bend in the river held memory. More recently, advanced submersible drones and sonar imaging have revealed signs of possible human-made structures, linear stone arrangements, pits, and hearth-like depressions. Nothing definitive yet, but the hunt continues. Each fragment recovered from the North Sea adds to the picture. A carved deer antler here, a human jawbone there, a shard of pottery, out of place, out of time. It's archaeology at the edge of possibility. Doggerland is not just being rediscovered. It is being resurrected. While Doggerland itself may be gone, its people live on, in us. Thanks to modern genetic research, especially advances in ancient DNA extraction, we can now trace the migrations and ancestry of prehistoric Europeans in astonishing detail. When scientists analyzed genomes from Mesolithic skeletons across Europe, some found in Britain, others in Scandinavia, France, and Germany, they discovered striking similarities. These people, likely Doggerland's inhabitants or close neighbors, share genetic markers indicating a common origin: dark-haired, blue or green-eyed, with skin slightly darker than modern northern Europeans. They were descendants of the original Paleolithic settlers who entered Europe after the Ice Age. But what's more fascinating is what happened after Doggerland drowned. As the sea swallowed their homeland, these displaced people spread outward into what are now Britain, Ireland, the Low Countries, and Scandinavia. Their DNA mingled with incoming Neolithic farmers from the Near East, who brought agriculture, and later with Indo-European-speaking steppe peoples who brought metalwork and new languages. Despite all these later layers, traces of Doggerland's people remain in European populations today, particularly among the British, Irish, and Basque. It's not just genes they passed on, but behaviors. Some studies suggest Mesolithic hunter-gatherers had a surprisingly deep understanding of landscape management and seasonal planning. It's possible that even early farming techniques in the British Isles were influenced by Doggerland traditions, blending old foraging wisdom with new agricultural practices. Through genetic and cultural threads, Doggerland's legacy survived, not as a civilization preserved in stone, but as a seed buried in blood. Can we bring Doggerland back? Not in reality. The sea has claimed it, but in data, maps, models, and imagination, Doggerland is being raised from the deep. A growing interdisciplinary movement is pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Marine archaeologists collaborate with geologists, oceanographers, and even AI researchers to digitally reconstruct the landscape. LiDAR scans, seismic surveys, and sediment analysis are combined into high-resolution 3D models of valleys, rivers, and lakes. These aren't just speculative. They're accurate down to a meter. Museums like the National Museum of Antiquities in the Netherlands and the British Museum now feature Doggerland exhibits. Some even offer VR tours where visitors walk through digitally recreated forests, listening to sounds of Mesolithic birds and hunting alongside ancient people. Writers and filmmakers, too, are beginning to embrace Doggerland, not as fantasy, but as forgotten history. It appears in novels and documentaries, and even in speculative fiction as Europe's first Atlantis. Some researchers have proposed underwater excavation projects in the shallowest zones of the Dogger Bank, though these remain challenging and costly. But the will is there. Doggerland has become a symbol of both human fragility and resilience. In a world facing its own rising seas, the story of Doggerland resonates deeply. It reminds us how quickly paradise can be lost, and how stories endure even when the land is not. Perhaps most importantly, Doggerland proves that history isn't just written in stone. Sometimes it sleeps beneath the waves, waiting to be remembered. So, who are Doggerland's mysterious inhabitants? They were us, ancient, resourceful, and vulnerable. They loved, feared, and wondered. They built homes by rivers that no longer exist and buried their dead under forests now buried beneath silt. They watched the seas rise, the animals flee, and their gods go silent as the waves claimed everything. But they didn't vanish. They adapted. They moved. They remembered. We find them now in bones and stone, in DNA and myth, in forgotten rituals and folk tales. Their legacy is not a crumbled ruin or a forgotten city. It is an idea, a reminder of how much the world can change and how much humanity endures. Doggerland forces us to rethink history. Civilization didn't begin with cities. It began with people, moving through forests, crossing ice bridges, building families, drawing on cave walls, and adapting to a world constantly in motion. We often think of the past as fixed, static, dry. But the story of Doggerland is liquid, shifting, eroding, deep. It speaks not in bricks but in bones, not in records but in remnants. It is history that hides from us, and history we must seek out with care. The sea, for all its beauty, is a graveyard, but it is also a mirror. In the drowned valleys of Doggerland, we see our own reflection, a people shaped by their world, and shaping it in return. As sea levels rise again today, Doggerland is not just memory. It is a warning. It reminds us that no land is permanent, no culture immune to collapse, no people too advanced to fall. But it also gives us hope, because even after 8,000 years, their story is still being told. If the ocean could whisper, what stories would it tell? Subscribe to the Crit Stories for more mysteries buried by time.